So the Ryan's games, they were definitely a counter to Command & Conquer, kind of. And I felt they kept in the spirit of those games, because Command & Conquer definitely fell off. But you guys, you had the steampunk aesthetic.
Right.
And you had the caravans. And it was just... And the Sand People, too. Wasn't that the games?
Yep. Yeah.
God, it was really diverse.
Yep.
And you think of games like StarCraft, where they've had the same things. You guys really took it in a different direction, but we don't have to talk about that game.
I know. I mean, I certainly loved making Rise of Legends. Rise of Legends was one of the most fun development processes because it was meant to be a multiplayer game from right off.
Yeah.
And the multiplayer version of that game is great. Like, it's a really good, fun...
It still holds up.
Game. I think so. You know, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I feel like it maybe turned out that we were better strategy game designers than world builders. I'm not sure that the world, you know, may have been a little too out there for people or something like that. But it was a lot of fun to make that game. We still hear from people that loved playing it, and so that's really what you're aiming for at the end of the day.
Yeah. Any thoughts of returning to a massive size game like that, like with big doomsday weapons? And
I mean, you never say never.
Yeah.
You know, I've been through I don't know how many platform transitions now. When I started off, you know, if you sold 100,000 copies of your flight simulator, that was about as good as you could possibly imagine a game being. And then games came along like the Ultima series and Civilization and things like that sort of redefined what success actually meant. But it was still hardcore PC games with floppy disks and, you know, your memory managers and all these kind of things. And then it's been consoles, and then it's been back to PC, and then it's been back to consoles again, and now it's mobile. And I just love that the industry is in such constant transition that there's always new stuff to learn. I never feel like I've come anywhere close to learning everything there is to know about the industry.
Definitely. And I think we're approaching a time where phones could be the consoles in 10 years.
Right.
Where all you do is just plug your phone in, which would also be a perfect time to maybe make a bigger game for a phone, because you would have theoretically a controller. And they already make controllers that you hook up to your phone.
Yep.
Which is really, really interesting.
And I got to say, personally, that I love tablet games because of the device form factor.
Yeah.
That you can just like, all right, I'm just popped open a game, and there we go. I'm playing on a tablet. I don't have to update anything, or rarely. I don't have to update my operating system. I don't have to do this. I don't have to wait for the whole thing to kind of boot up and turn on. And so I am really excited about tablets as a platform, and I'm really happy to be making games for them, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it evolves over the next 5 years.
That's definitely been the best part of like tablets and iOS gaming and Android gaming is the accessibility. You don't have to update drivers. It's just plug it and go. You download it. It's auto patches. I remember 10 years ago, you'd buy a new game a year after it came out or something, and then you'd have to patch it, and then check to see if anyone made a mod fix online, because the Civilization 3 and 4 had people made online unofficial patches for those games because balancing issues. But now it's you guys could just do it really quick. It's a good time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for us, the device transition to the platform transition to mobile has meant that these made games really accessible for all kinds of people. You know, again, when I started off, like, you were just looking for the 18 to 30-year-old male gamer. Like,
that's who I was.
And so was I.
Yeah.
That's how you started off. But now the notion is that instead of a big hit game being 3 million, 4 million people, like, now that there might be 100 million people that eventually play DomiNations, and that can be exposed to this love of history and the grandeur of the subject matter. Like, that to us is really exciting. And that's what mobile means to us, is a broad audience that we can share our passions with.
Well, definitely looking over the game before we came in, the factions and the history part is, I think, a very interesting side, because a lot of these types of strategy games for mobile games don't really do that. And I know Dan has a big history with
big
history
lover
games.
of history, big lover of history games. So how would you guys say, like, you translated the history into the mobile format? Like, how did that influence the development of that?
Part of what's fun about doing a history game is that everyone on the planet knows something about human history. Like, even if they just sort of dimly remember it from their high school classes. And so they know the characters from history. They already know Alexander the Great, Cleopatra, all those kinds of generals from antiquity. They know what the pyramids are. They've heard about the Hanging Gardens. So for us, our job is to make that history be really accessible to people, so that doesn't come across as dry, doesn't come across as boring, doesn't come across as too complicated and, you know, numbers and stat sheets and all that sort of thing. We just want people to have the delight of interacting in a very taps-in kind of way with this world that they're building and that they're progressing through.
So in DomiNations, didn't really see. All I saw was someone playing as the Pharaoh, the Egyptians. But if you pick a different faction, will it change the way your buildings and everything look?
They will, yes. We have different building sets in the game for the different civilizations, which again just reinforces
which is great.
That sweep of history. Yeah. We love that aspect of it. We'll consider adding nations, later as the game progresses. But yeah, ultimately, it also gives us the opportunity to have asymmetric choices in the games. Like, up to this point, strategy games have generally been about everybody's sort of a generically plays the same basic faction.
Everything looks the same. That's the problem with
Right.
my mom.
Clash of Clans.
Yeah, Clash of Clans and stuff
right.
is it's like you can't. Everything looks the same and it gets boring after a while. And I know it's hugely popular, and same with
the Game of War.
Game of War, and those it's so basic and carbon. And I think that's really what stands out about DomiNations. Not that I'm comparing them to those games, but the fact that you did take the time to at least try to diversify,
flesh out the different factions. And
Well, the first thing that we learned from Sid Meier is a game is a series of interesting choices, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the main goals with DomiNations was to add choice into these kinds of games, meaningful choice that felt like you were making a big decision and that it was going to have impacts on how your game played out from that point on.
So you would say that I know one of you in the team worked on Alpha Centari. It wasn't you, was it? I apologize.
It was me and Brian together.
Okay, yeah, I just looked it up. I knew one of you at least did it. So you would say you took a lot from that into this, or how was it working on that?
I would say that the commonality between these are using the prototype method of game development, and this is another Sid Meier rule, is like, don't make design documents, don't sit endlessly and talk and whiteboard, like just code. Just start coding a game. And that's what all of the strategy games that we've worked on have in common. We started with a basic concept. We threw a few things together. Within a week, maybe two, we had a first playable. And from then, you're just playing it every single day. You're seeing what's fun, what's not fun. You rip out the stuff that's not fun, and you put more things that might be fun in until you find the magic of the game. And so that's what we did on Alpha Centari. It's how Civilization was made, and it's also how we made DomiNations.
I can't remember. I know Sid Meier says that, but who are those YouTube extra credits? They always talk about. They're a YouTube site that's totally dedicated to amateur game, like not amateur, but hobbyist game developers talking about inside knowledge and shit like that. And they always say the first thing you should do is just make a playable build as soon as possible and get it around. Because that's really where everything kind of comes together. You don't you could put a design document together and say you want to do all these things, but it might not work out.
Right, that's all theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long did it take you guys to put together a playable build of DomiNations?
It was 2 weeks, maybe 3 at the most. So
that's impressive.
Rudimentary, right? Like,
Yep.
There's games like Thomas Was Alone, right?
Right.
Where he wasn't very good at art, so he just did basic. And so I'm sure his first early builds of that game look exactly like it finally turned out. So I'm sure the early builds of this were not very heavy on the art, but that's fine.
Right, as long as you have the core gameplay in there.
Yeah.
We had a lot of ideas that we knew we wanted to take from what we would consider classic strategy games. Yeah. So very early on, we had hunting and gathering in the game where there's these animals kind of hopping around the map, and you tap on them and you hunt them, and then they drop rare resource items like fur or leather. And that mechanic alone turned out to be really fun. It changed how these games are played. It made you care a lot about being sure that you came back when the animals respawn so that you'd always have your full complement of rare resources. And then we would be like, okay, great. What do we spend these rare resources on? And so from that came the mercenary camp, where you get these powerful but one-use soldier groups that you're able to drop in a battle and turn the tide. You get temple blessings that give you temporary bonuses to your attack or your defense or your resource collecting. And so just from this very simple system, these little animals hopping around, came all these things that add this layer of depth to the game that we're really happy how it came out in the final product.
I saw someone play like a 10-minute demo on YouTube about it, and that is the first thing is the hunter and gathering. And I went, this looks a lot like Age of Empires. I'm like, this feels it feels very familiar, and I really enjoyed that because that's a series that's also fallen in hard times lately. So did you?
We certainly drew our inspiration from.
No, it's perfectly
classic
okay.
strategy games.
Who's the Epic Games guy?
Cliff?
Yeah, Cliff Blazinski. Yeah. He says, game design is you're not stealing, it's borrowing great ideas and building upon those. And that's the essential thing of game design, where I don't think a lot of consumers of games understand that.
Oh, yeah.
Game design is constant innovation.
Yeah. We agree, and even if you just look at the history of movies or something like that, there's a vocabulary of movies.
Right.
It involves how you position the camera, how you make cuts, how dialogue flows, and movies at a technical level in some ways are just recombining what's already been done to develop the vocabulary of games. Or sorry, the vocabulary of movies.
No, yeah, definitely. So, did you want to jump in? And
sure. If you've seen the videos online, then you've already got a pretty good sense of it. But it'll still we can still step through some talking points.
Cool.
So the trailer is just a quick minute and puts you in the.
Oh yeah, I watched this morning.
Yeah. Since it's just
the music is good.
Yeah, I do enjoy the music. It's funny, for a while there, we were using, for our temp music for everything, like internal trailers, was always the music from Last of the Mohicans. So it was
That's
like
funny.
That's
running,
a great
running through the woods,
right.
slow-mo, chasing after the deer. And
is that a Hans Zimmer soundtrack?
I'm not sure, but so then, eventually
get some royalties on that.
it's time for us to...
he takes 100% of the revenue.
Exactly. So that's the trailer. It does a pretty good job of introducing the themes, but I've also got a longer gameplay video. So as you guys are well aware, the game is about all of human history. You can see one of the other building sets here, the Asian building set, Northern European building set. You can see we've added siege combat to the army types that you can do. So much like some of the classic games we're drawing from, they're fragile, they're weak, but man, if they get going, they can really blast through an enemy's defenses.
Do they have a better range than Civilization cannons?
Yeah,
those only have a 1 unit range, but they're worthless.
You can see the war elephants there, which are an example of the mercenary units that are rare but powerful and fun.
Very cool.
And of course, you're starting off in the very beginning of human history, where hunting and gathering are the way that you build your civilization.
I like the animation right after they kill the deer.
Yay!
I'd be happy too.
Yeah. And then we also wanted to add expansion back into the 4X. We feel like expansion has been missing from the 4X part of these games. Then it's time to build up your town and start moving through the ages of human history. This is just a little montage that shows you're going from the classical to the... Or sorry, you're going from the...
Classic age, yeah.
Yeah, it's... how does it go right
bronze.
now? It starts... It's stone, bronze, iron, classical, medieval, and gunpowder and enlightenment.
Yeah.
You got it.
Gunpowder is where you first get guns, which is, of course, one of the big fulcrums in the game. The haves and the have-nots. And so then we have hundreds of different kinds of units in the game, which add more depth, and especially your nation choice, because a lot of these are the unique units for the nations. You've got your 7 different nations here, each, as we said, with their asymmetric powers and unique units. And we'll do a quick deep dive on... So the British, due to their history of successful imperialism, get bonus loot from their attacks. And of course, when you think of British armed forces through the ages, they have really good longbowmen and ranged infantry. The longbows at Agincourt, or even Robin Hood as a character. And so that's their special unit. The Greeks, heavy cavalry. You think of Alexander the Great on his horse Bucephalus and some of his classic victories. So they have the heavy cavalry
and
special
this is
units.
like the progression they have.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And they also, for powers, they're known for their monuments and their technology, so those are cheaper for them. Chinese, first thing you think about, big population, right? Big country. And so the Chinese get a bonus citizen that they can do things with. In this game, you need different numbers of citizens to do different kinds of tasks, which makes for kind of a fun optimization game if you want to play it, where you want to get everything exactly right on so that all your citizens are utilized at once.
I'm sure Reddit will have an optimized wiki within
a
week of launch.
Hopefully so. And then this is just playing through the game. You can see you're building your army. We'll go to the mercenary camp where you get to spend your rare resources. So you see your rare resources up there and some of the things that you can buy down there. We also wanted to add a little bit of SimCity into the game. And so you see these roads that are laid out on a road network. Any building that's connected to your town center using a road generates a gold bonus. And this is the gold bonus here.
Oh,
wow.
And so you have a trade-off of, do you want to make a good economy where you've got a lot of roads connecting things, or do you want to make a good compact defense where the roads are outside of the walls?
So city building is a fundamental aspect.
Absolutely. And there's definitely a lot more depth to the city building than there's been in these kinds of games so far.
Right.
Temple allows you for blessings, which again you can use your rare resources on, so there's a bunch of different ways to spend those rares. The rares actually become a major part of the economy and it's a lot of fun. Wouldn't be a world history game if you didn't have a library going through all the technologies of human history. And of course, there's Wonders of the World there that you're also able to build. Build the Hanging Gardens here, which gives a bonus to your fruit trees that are in your area. There are, every 2 ages, you get 4 wonders, of which you can pick 1 to build. So,
okay, so there is choice.
Absolutely.
Right, you were saying choice is a very fundamental aspect of
This is on top of individual cultures having their own bonuses.
Yep.
Right, so you can play each, essentially, that affects your play style.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. One of the other things you'll notice is in the battles, in a lot of these games, mostly what you're doing is fighting the base. And what we really wanted you to have that feeling of army-on-army combat, that you're not just fighting the base, you're fighting his army.
Right, like the classic strategy kind of feel.
So you'll notice that there are troop generators that might be barracks for heavy infantry or stables for cavalry, and you need to pay close attention to what he's built and how upgraded they are and where they are, so you can put down your own counters to those troops. So when the cav comes after your siege, right, if they get to the siege, they're going to kill it pretty quick, but you got to keep some of your troops in reserve, some of your heavy infantry that can take down the cavalry. Same when you see his infantry coming, you want to put down your longbow units, your archer units, in order to be able to counter them.
Interesting. So a lot more depth than something like Clash of Clans,
We
or
feel
where
like
you just
it.
put everything down at once and run for it.
And you also notice this rally button over here in the left. That means that every 30 to 40 seconds you're able to tell your troops to go attack a specific building or a specific point.
Okay,
and
so
so
you can
when
control
to
them.
use those, right, when to use those rally commands become a really important part of your strategy. The game is about all of human history. You're going from the Stone Age to the space race. Got 7 different nations that you get to choose from, and then you get to decide whether you're going to be more an economic civilization, a defensive civilization, or an offensive civilization. Roll up an army and go beat up on your enemies.
Now, is it always PvP, or is there... I know there is a campaign, but is there just like a free-flowing you versus computer thing, or is it just...
There's not a free-for-all in the way that some of the old RTS games used to have.
Right,
yeah.
But yeah, you can play against the single-player campaigns, or you can play against other players.
Okay, yeah.
Cool. How would you describe it more as like a historical simulator or a strategy game with historical elements or like historical motif?
Probably, at its core, it would be a strategy game that has history as its subject matter.
Yeah.
We think of history as being this phenomenal subject matter. A lot of marketing people, they sort of poo-poo history as something that is going to be compelling to a lot of people. It's kind of dry or it's kind of boring. But we think, again, that everybody knows something about it, and it makes a great subject matter. We think of history as being its own IP, kind of. It's actually sort of like a Star Wars or like a Lord of the Rings.
It's a lore.
Right, exactly.
That's the story that happened. Right?
Everyone has heroes. On that same note, you look at... Sid Meier hasn't returned to a sci-fi Alpha Centari type game since Beyond Earth. And I don't think Beyond Earth hit quite as heavily as the Civilizations. I think more people resonate with history because it's so familiar.
Yeah, you don't have to... And we discovered this on Alpha Centari when we did Alpha Centari, which I remain thinking is a really fun game, and we have really hardcore fans who love it, but it was one of our weaker selling games ever.
I used to love this.
I enjoyed it as
people
well.
that are really passionate about it, but if Civilization 2 ended up selling 3 or 4 million copies, and Alpha Centauri might have sold 1.5.
Yeah.
And so when we looked at it and we said, well, a lot of the problem is it's hard to know what a nanoparticle transmitter is. Right. People just don't. They're like, I don't know what that is. Nonlinear mathematics. What's that? Not sure. And so one of the ways that Brian brought people into the world was using kind of philosophical quotes and the philosophies of the different factions that you could kind of map your own experience in your own life onto those faction leaders, and that worked really well. I think in Alpha Centauri grounded in the real world, despite it being a science fiction game. But still, it was harder to get people into the game because you had to teach them what the world was about.
You were teaching them about futurism and the predictions of the future.
Exactly.
That game definitely predates a lot, because now it's very popular for people to think about and speculate about the future. But in the 90s, futurism was very academic and not really... Like, people were talking about it, but Alpha Centauri was like my youngest exposure to talking about those concepts. And as, 99, 98? I was a freshman in high school, maybe. And now I look back, I'm very into talking about the future. And Alpha Centauri did a really good job. How much research went into those concepts?
A lot of research went into those concepts. I had a lot of friends who were going to Johns Hopkins and various graduate school programs at that point, and I would literally sit down with them and say, okay, in your field, like, what are the discoveries that 10 years from now, 25 years from now, 100 years from now might change the face of the world. And I would just repeat that question to like 10 different subject matter experts, and out of that would come all of these ideas for the names of technologies or types of buildings or things along those lines. So yeah, a ton of research went into it, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that was a time before the internet was the internet.
Yep.
Like, people had it, but it was still AOL and dial-up. Not like it is. And now with the internet, this game is possible.
Yep, absolutely.
Which is a innovation in video games. So,
Right.
Yeah.